Welcome to the Moviequips podcast. I'm Stephen Bourne, and welcome also to viewers who are checking out the video. It's not much to look at right now, but thanks for checking it out, and we'll see how this goes. This week I'm going to be reviewing the new James Bond movie entitled Spectre. Daniel Craig returns as James Bond in the 24th official installment of the long-running movie franchise, loosely based on British author Ian Fleming's series of novels. In Spectre, Craig's fourth kick at the starring role, Bond, an MI6 field operative with a license to kill, continues his hunt to uncover the enigmatic global criminal organization linked to his previous missions that began with Casino Royale. Unfortunately, Spectre is an empty and heavily hyped best of Bond reel. Much of what he faces plays out as little more than a clumsy pastiche of refabricated highlights from such 007 favorites as Goldfinger, Live and Let Die, GoldenEye, etc. What remains as pointless, boring, and brainlessly fluffy entertainment. Hashtag not because it's 2015. The film begins during lavishly macabre Day of the Dead celebrations in Mexico City, where Bond has been dispatched to assassinate a terrorist plotting a public bombing. Sort of like in the beginning of Casino Royale, but without the cool parkour. You soon discover this mission wasn't vetted by HQ, giving viewers the first in a series of utterly flabbergasting plot devices concocted to shove forward an already flimsy script. How did the person from MI6 who sent Bond to Mexico know who the bomber was by name, when the bomber is part of this multi-layered shadow world of evildoers MI6 knows nothing about? Who ratted? When? It's a mystery, as is how the bomber managed to escape an explosion that destroyed the hotel he was in, as is why Bond then ends up fighting him in a helicopter in mid-flight. It's in the trailer. It looks great, but his task was to kill the bomber. Quit friggin' around, take the shot, there and in the final scene. Sadly, Spectre feels like cinematic filler meant to fulfill contractual obligations and maybe tie up some loose ends while setting up the real sequel to Skyfall. Like with the Fantastic Four films, it's as though the studio faced losing control of the material or its star if something wasn't cranked out now. That's the worst aspect of this movie. Other than introducing a couple of new characters to the reboot, unlike the last three films, this story doesn't play out as though it actually matters. This episode is the stuff of end-credit stingers, not an entire movie. While the bones of cyber-terrorism seen in Skyfall are picked through to cobble together the semblance of an Orwellian-like threat the modern world pretty well already lives under, it's never really made clear why the bad guys are considered the bad guys beyond them not being the good guys who do a lot of the same things the bad guys do. Deciding on what the best thing about this movie is might need to wait until the next James Bond movie hits the big screen. That sucks. Continuing on, Bond soon beds the bomber's widow in an incredibly time and talent wasting scene featuring veteran actress Monica Bellucci, and then he stuffs her in a pipeline that whisks her across the border to safety like in The Living Daylights. No, not really. While the rare occasion of 007 having sex with a woman too old to be his daughter does occur, he reassures then pawns off Bellucci's character with the same dated attitude shared by most of Bond's previous incarnations. However, the hunt does lead him to a snow-swept alpine clinic similar to the one seen on Her Majesty's Secret Service. That's where he ends up chasing newly appointed Heavy Hinks, played by David Bautista, who is overall an amalgam of every memorably ruthless henchman in the James Bond universe, from Goldfinger's Odd Job without the blade-rimmed hat to Live and Let Die's Tee-Hee without the metal claw. Making up a spot the original Bond source drinking game out of watching this movie might be its only source of enjoyment for many longtime die-hard fans. That's an ejector seat scene. Take a big swig or two of that Gordon's gin with vodka and quina lillet. Ooh, there's a fight on a train scene. Hammer back 4 or 5 more. Spectre's uninspiring coloring book of a screenplay sluggishly drags Bond through a weary maze of increasingly dumb plot points that eventually drop him into the secret worldwide syndicate of meanies and voyeurs called Spectre. And face to face with the nemesis he never knew he had, Franz Oberhauser, vaguely played by Christoph Waltz. Easily the weakest of the reboot villains, Oberhauser is literally Bond's brother from another mother, being the birth son of the family that adopted Bond when he was still a 12-year-old orphaned Bond. Out of bizarre sibling rivalry, Oberhauser's pet name for Bond is Cuckoo, in reference to the parasitic nature of the bird when young. He also faked his own death years before setting up his prerequisite secret lair seen here, and now goes by the name Ernst Stavro Blofeld. I want to say Oberhauser chose that name because he simply loved Fleming's books. Léa Seydoux also co-stars here as clinical psychiatrist Dr. Madeleine Swann, the latest so far surviving love interest of the now newly recycled old James Bond of the last century. Again, unfortunately, the script has no idea how to make her a consistent enough character to care about. She's introduced as a strong-willed, self-sufficient woman with a shady past who initially stands toe-to-toe intellectually and physically with Bond. She scolds him more than once and proves she's adept with a gun. Then later on, when all of that would actually matter, Swann uselessly sits back in wide-eyed fear without being impeded in any way while Bond is tortured in front of her. In a final death blow to her character's potential, Swann becomes the tied-up victim in distress during the final countdown of yet another big explosion. Does that count as 15 or 20 swigs drinking game-wise? It's easy to cite movies inspired by the tired Bond trademark that have long since surpassed it for the benefit of fans. Where the previous 3 reboot films fearlessly refreshed the franchise by stripping away its previous weird gadgets, corny humor, and chauvinism, while providing Bond with a rich character development, Spectre lazily feeds on heavy doses of those rather antiquated cliches, while set on the same sad, self-defeating autopilot mode of an addict in relapse. The old James Bond is back, and not for the better, and that's a shame. And that's my review of the new James Bond movie Spectre. You've been listening to the moviequips podcast. My name is Stephen Bourne. Thank you very much for tuning in, as well as those who have checked out the video version of this. Until next time, have a good one. Cheers.